All right, so I'm Dr. Lindsey Levitan. I have been at Shepherd, I believe this is my 7th year, and I am a political psychologist, which means that I try to understand where people's attitudes come from, what role social influence plays in not just helping us figure out what our attitudes are and how we're going to engage politically, but also how strongly we hold those attitudes, how tightly we hold those attitudes. I am the Psych Club, also faculty advisor to the Psych Club, and I largely teach classes that are in our core sequence. And I want to make sure that I also introduce Dr. Eufek, who is our newest faculty member who comes to us from a previous position at St. Edward's University. Did you want to say a few things about who you are?
Sure. So my background is in clinical psychology, and I'm really excited to be here. And I'm just kind of hanging out to also listen to Dr. Levitan's talk, and just kind of get familiar with things and learn about all the exciting opportunities. But one of the things I'm interested in is also working with students on research, students that have interests in clinical disorders or diagnosis and things like that. So that's something that I'm excited to get started. So if you or other students have any interests in that, then I'd be thrilled to talk to you about it anytime. So thank you.
All right. So, as oops, as far as things go, first we should probably make sure we know what psychology is. And psychology is a science. It's the scientific study of basically our thoughts, our behaviors, our feelings, basically the mind. And that has many components, many different angles you can take, and many different applications. So many people, when they're freshmen, are planning on being professional psychologists. So these are the people who apply the psychology, who use the psychology in their careers. The most common of which our students are interested in is clinical and counseling psychology. But we also have students who go on to work in industrial organizational psychology, which is more about applying psychology to the workplace, and school psychology. We actually have a connection with Marshall University, where they have an ed-sci program that they've been recruiting some of our students for. And of late, a number of our students are interested in forensic psychology. And the sociology and criminal justice program actually added a minor a couple of years ago just because of interest from our psych majors in that. And we do reasonably frequently have people who double major over there because of their interests. There are also a number of research subfields which our psychology students are going to learn about so that they'll be able to use them in their future careers. I like to joke that my husband's father, who is a psychiatrist, applies psychology to fix people, and I look at them when they're broken to see how it works, right? So the research subfields are about figuring out how the mind actually works so that the applied fields can use that knowledge to help people. So there are a lot of different areas. There's cognitive psychology, which is more about how the mind processes information. There's developmental psychology. There's biological psychology, which has more of an emphasis on how the brain works, how the endocrine system works. There's perception, learning, social psychology, evolutionary psychology. Social psychology is the area that I fall under. So it is about how we think about the world around us, how we are influenced by it, and how we influence the world around us. And there's cross-cultural psychology as well. And the emphasis of that is about how culture is influencing things and how the way people's minds work can differ as a function of culture. So again, many of our students are interested in ultimately becoming mental health service providers. So it's important to note that there are a few different ways to get there. So as psychologists, we are often talking about clinical psychologists, forensic psychologists, counseling psychologists, but there are also psychoanalysts and family and marriage counselors, therapists who may or may not actually be psychologists. They may have training in another area, like in medicine or social work. And then there are folks who provide mental health services who are not psychologists. For example, there are clinical social workers and psychiatrists. Fair enough. So these are many options, but honestly, there are a lot of options outside of psychology as well. So if you want to be a professional in psychology, that's often helped by going to graduate school, getting a master's degree, getting a PhD or a PsyD. So that is additional training. We do have many of our students do get jobs directly out of school, but oftentimes they are planning on working for a little while, getting some more experience and qualifications before they then go on to grad school as well. Um, but that said, a lot of our majors just choose to go in entirely different directions, and psychology is useful for many, many different fields. We have a number of students who go into business. In fact, Lacey is getting her MBA. We have students who go on to become teachers, to work in education. And honestly, I remember when I was in school, the chair of my program telling us, you know, you've chosen a good field because the worst thing that happens is you don't become a professor and you go into advertising and make twice as much money anyway. So it's useful in a lot of different areas. I remember I had an internship at IBM, and my boss was a psychologist there as well. So my manager was a psychologist. So there are a lot of different a lot of different places you can go with a psych degree. And what we have here, this is from, I believe, the American Psychological Association, a breakdown of what people did in their, as a function of what degree they got in psychology, what the level was. So you can see on the left, I'm resisting the urge to point. Um, People went a lot of different places with a bachelor's degree in psychology. The yellow is where they're providing professional services. But you can see that there's also a lot of teaching and sales, advertising, a lot of management. And so there are a lot of things that this is useful for. What you do see is as people get the higher level degrees, the master's degree, the doctorate or professional degrees, they're much more likely to be offering professional services, as well as a bit more likely to be teaching. So that's where the doctorate comes in. So I have a doctorate. And so we can then see all of the different options there that we can use. All right, I quite agree. So to make this especially useful, this reflects the university's overall mission and some things that Lacey told you about how the idea is to make you well-rounded. The psych program really does take that to heart. So, well, first of all, it's going to help you understand human behavior, and that can be useful in a variety of ways. Understand why people think the things they do, why they do the things they do, how they're different, how they're the same. But more broadly than just the psychology, we make sure that people have good communication skills. We work on writing. We make sure that there are plenty of opportunities to get better at oral presentations, public speaking, so that our students can be more comfortable with it and not have that sort of like oh no, I have to present, if you have to, in your career, get up and present to people, talk to people. And we also do put a emphasis on quantitative literacy as well, on being able to deal with numbers, so that you can have that competency as well. And we also make sure that people have the ability to manage their time, to handle complex projects, be self-directed. So our capstone, which Lacey could tell you all kinds of things about hers, um, is that we make sure that you have the opportunity to learn how to learn, right? So you come up with a project that you want to do, you make yourself a sort of mini expert in that area, and you carry out a project. And that's not just about making sure you know a lot of psychology, although that's totally there. But it's also just for career training, right? So you have something to talk about when you're going to interview with for a job, and they're like, do you have any experience managing a complicated project? And you're like, well, let me tell you about my capstone project. I had a student in my senior thesis class who came in and was like, I got a job this week because I took this class. Because they can talk about how they had to manage their time to do this project. And we're there, we're guiding, we're giving advice, but it's still something that you can own and talk about what you've accomplished. And so that's just important for career prep and getting jobs as well, getting in the door, to be able to talk about how you can do those things and to provide specific evidence. All right. And as part of that, we also make sure that you know how to um, keep your skills up to date. You know how to learn independently, because obviously psychology is not just going to stop when you get your degree. Like, it doesn't just freeze in time and nobody ever learns anything new. So it's important to us that you have the skills to keep up with the literature, to keep your skills up so that you don't miss any new developments and can continue to um, have the most cutting edge skills and resources. Also, the other bullet points, we do make sure we've incorporated ethics into our curriculum to make sure that people are considering that and understanding the different issues involved in being a psychologist. And um, and I think that we really do a pretty good job of making sure that people have skills for a wide variety of jobs. So that's a little bit about, that's partly just being in a liberal arts institution. So I want to talk a little bit more about Shepherd and why Shepherd is cool to be psychologist at or a psych student at. And Lacey kind of mentioned a lot of it already, because she went through the experience with us. And so we like having the small classes, right? That's actually part of why I'm here. I was at a big state school before I was here, and I barely got to see my undergraduates. I was expected to spend my time either working with graduate students or in my office quietly working on research so that I could get grants. And that is not what Shepherd is like. I actually, at that other big institution, I got told I was spending too much time with my students. And that was the moment that I was like, I do not belong at this school. And I got to Shepherd, and they gave me, when I told them that story, they gave me basically the look that Lacey just gave me. Like, they said, what? We're not going to say that here. Spend time with your undergraduates. And so I knew this was the place for me. I do, in addition to my teaching, in addition to mentoring people through their thesis projects, I also maintain a research lab where I do sometimes one-on-one projects with undergraduates, sometimes with a team of undergraduates, and involve them in research and take them to conferences. I have a conference proposal that's due tomorrow that I'm working on with a student, so we can present at the Eastern Psychological Association conference. And so we sort of pride ourselves on having those one-on-one contacts, on getting to know our students, being able to help them and give them what they need, and making sure that people don't slip through the cracks like they might if they weren't getting that personal attention. And it is nice. I often forget, but there's a bullet, so I won't. Our students get to know each other and form a support network and form a cohort. So Lacey can also talk a little bit about that, because your thesis group was definitely had some cohesion there. They usually do. All right, so I should also note that critical thinking skills are very important to us. There's actually research suggesting that psych students are among the best in terms of critical thinking skills, and so that's important to us, to make sure that people are trained more broadly in how to understand, apply logic, and figure out how things work. We've already mentioned a number of the hands-on opportunities we have. So I mentioned just now working in labs, doing research with faculty members. The project I'm working on now is looking at how to encourage people to have health behaviors that line up better with their attitudes. So people will know that they need to do certain things to stay healthy, and they want to stay healthy. How do we make it so they actually do follow through on those things? We also have a clinical internship program, which Dr. Eufek is now coordinating and can probably talk a little bit more about. But briefly, we place students in a number of local organizations that provide mental health services. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, but basically we place students, and oftentimes they get jobs out of those placements in the long run. And we also have incorporated into the classes a number of service learning opportunities. So students work with middle schoolers, or they go and volunteer their time with a church or with a community organization as part of their learning. Also important to note, we talked about how there are a lot of teaching assistants at some schools. And at my last institution, most of the undergrad classes were taught by graduate students, and we don't do that. Classes are taught by people with PhDs or other equivalent degrees. And if they aren't full-time faculty, they are generally faculty that actually are practitioners, and they come in and teach one or two classes to bring that sort of real-world experience in. So to talk more about those internships, which they're super valuable to our students. They give you that exposure so you can find out what you really want to do, and also give you the qualifications to be able to do it. And so at these sites, students generally have the opportunity to actually interact with clients, sit in on therapy sessions. Some have done site visits or done assessments and intake work, and generally get to experience the clinical realm and the counseling realm more clearly. And so we've had people placed in a lot of different sites. So for example, we have an ongoing relationship with Excel Youth, which focuses on services for children and adolescents, some of them referred by social services. And so we've had a lot of students go through there, and actually a lot of students end up being employed there after their internships. We've also gotten a number of students employed through Waystation, which is a homeless outreach program that provides a variety of services. One of my students recently was employed by WVU Medicine after her internship. So that one is doing, actually, no, I tell a lie. She was at Berkeley Medical Center, but we also have that relation with WV Medicine in Martinsburg. But the student I'm thinking of, it was Berkeley Medical Center, which has an inpatient crisis unit where they work. I'm still so proud. She came back to visit me once and was like, "I saved a man's life because I took your class." And I was like, I was also a little confused because she mentioned specifically my statistics class, but she actually was able to help someone because they were resistant to treatment, and she was able to walk them through the literature and explain to them their treatment options and allow them to make the information they needed to make their own decision, which is important. But in any case, we also have connections with Big Brothers Big Sisters. We've had a number of other sites over time. So we do like to give our students these opportunities. So where do they end up? Well, a lot of our students go to graduate school either immediately or after taking some time off to get some real world work. They go all over the place really when they're going to school. This is just a few of the places they've gone. Most frequently, we do see WVU and Frostburg. We have a connection with Frostburg where they have 2 slots in their Master's in Clinical and Counseling program reserved for Shepherd students. So the Shepherd students don't have to go through the broad pool of applicants. They kind of have a little bit of a fast track there where as long as they meet their requirements, Frostburg is going to take at least the top 2 of our students. And there are lots of other places that they go. They go sometimes to places in Baltimore that are closer to home. Sometimes they go farther afield. They go to Florida. For some reason, we had a spate there where a lot of them were going to Florida. They go to Massachusetts. They go all over the place to school. A lot of them actually stay here and go either to our MBA program or they go to our college student development and administration program, that both of those being here. And they specialize in a number of different areas, as you can see. Some of them go straight to the workforce and do not go to graduate school, and they often end up, as I already mentioned, working at some of our internship sites, providing services. But some of them also take different directions because our skills let them do that. So we have one who's a librarian at Columbia now. We have one who's an associate registrar at American, and they go all over the place and do really fascinating things, I have to say. So as far as the curriculum goes, I'm going to give you the Cliffs Notes version of that, which is there are a series of courses that all of our psych students take, including Introduction to Psych and stats and research methods, so you can understand the field and where the findings are coming from, and developmental psych, and something, a biological class in psychology and the history of psychology, and our capstone classes where you do that project. And then there are some electives that are restricted where you need to take one of these couple of options or 2 of these couple of options to make sure that you have a broad grounding in several different areas. So the group 1 electives are giving you content. So for example, memory and cognition, or learning, or sensation and perception, you're getting that content. but there's also a lab component. So you can kind of see where those findings are coming from, that they're not just appearing out of thin air or coming as inspiration to some old man sitting at a desk somewhere. And then we have the group 2 electives that are more about providing that broad base of information about how the mind works, which includes social psychology, abnormal psychology, and personality psychology. And then we offer a wide variety of electives. This is just some of them. So those allow people to focus more on the area that they're interested in. So there are ones about working with kids. There are ones about working in the clinical realm more generally. There are a lot of different options. I'm hoping that next year I'm planning on offering a class on persuasion and social influence, which would be actually joint with the political science program. We do have a number of students who are interested in both psychology and political science. So we got options. These are our faculty members. So we have Dr. Daly, who is a specialist in memory and cognition, although he's now expanded his work to look at the role of hobbies in people's lives. Dr. Dobish is a social psychologist with a particular emphasis on developmental psychology. I'm a political psychologist, which falls under social. Dr. Lovelace is our resident biopsychologist, and his interests lie primarily in sensation and perception, actually synesthesia. Dr. Mers is our sort of elder statesman of the department. He does history of psych. He is a social psychologist. He also does sports psychology and humanistic psychology. And finally, we have our newest member, Dr. Eufek, who has already introduced himself.